To be honest, no one requested a sequel to this video, but I personally wanted to do it. So if there was anyone who listened to the first part and did not request a second part, here it is. Seraphine told me I was the first person she had ever chosen. The system showed me 17 bodies that proved otherwise. Each victim awakened inside the same horror game. Each one earned her protection, and each one eventually died by her hand. While Seraphine fights through the game's hidden archive to rescue me, I must uncover the truth behind her obsession. Because if the system is telling the truth, the woman coming to save me may also be the person destined to kill me. Main Story Part 2. Chapter 34. The domain had changed. Not because of a rule. Not because of the system. Not even because of a battle. It had changed because of a choice. My choice. The violet-eyed woman stood within the territory. Accepted. The executioner remained kneeling at the edge. Claimed. The shadowed boss stood in the center. Waiting. Unmarked. Unchosen. And beyond the boundary, more presences gathered. Watching. Learning. Waiting for their turn. The realization settled heavily in my chest. This wasn't a kingdom. It wasn't an army. It wasn't even a faction. It was becoming something stranger. A place where monsters competed for belonging. This is insane. I rubbed my forehead. Why am I interviewing horror bosses? The Crimson Boss laughed softly. Because they want something. They want me. Exactly. Seraphine's arms tightened immediately. Yes. You weren't supposed to answer that. I know. The shadowed boss smirked. For some reason, that annoyed me. You seem very confident. I am. And why is that? His golden eyes narrowed slightly. Because, unlike most of the others. A pause. I understand what you're building. The domain pulsed. Not approving. Not rejecting. Listening. That answer got everyone's attention. Even the executioner raised his head slightly. The Crimson Boss folded her arms. Interested. Continue. The shadowed man looked at the territory. The ground. The boundary. The gathered presences. This isn't a prison. Silence. His gaze shifted toward Seraphine. Even if some wish it were. Her eyes narrowed instantly. The temperature dropped. Be careful. But he continued anyway. It's not a collection. His gaze shifted toward the executioner. It's not a hierarchy. Then he looked directly at me. It's a future. The domain pulsed. Hard. Everyone felt it. Interesting, the Crimson Boss murmured. The shadowed man continued. Everything that comes here changes. His eyes narrowed. The system changes. The players change. The bosses change. A pause. Even she changed. He pointed directly at Seraphine. The entire territory tensed. I felt her grip lock instantly. Dangerously. The shadowed boss didn't stop. The Seraphine I knew would have slaughtered every player around us. Silence. He's right, the Crimson Boss said quietly. Seraphine didn't answer. Because she couldn't. It was true. The shadowed man looked back at me. You make things different. The domain pulsed again. Steady. Strong. And you think that makes you worthy of joining? I asked. No. That answer surprised me. The shadowed man shook his head. I think it makes me willing. Silence. No arrogance. No boasting. No manipulation. Just honesty. Ugh. The Crimson Boss smiled slightly. Now he's learning. I ignored her, because something else had caught my attention. The players, the ones outside the boundary, were changing. Not attacking, not advancing. Watching, listening. One player slowly lowered their weapon. Another sat down. A third began writing something. Recording. Taking notes. What are they doing? The violet-eyed boss answered. Adapting. My stomach sank. That's usually bad. It is. The system could observe. The bosses could observe. And now the players were learning too. The squad leader stood near the boundary, watching me, watching the bosses, watching everything. Then he smiled. A small smile. But I didn't like it. Not one bit. What's that look for? I muttered. The Crimson Boss followed my gaze. Then sighed. Because he finally understands. Understands what? The answer came from the squad leader himself. You can't force your way in. Silence. You can't conquer it. The players nearby listened. You can't capture him. More players nodded. Then he looked directly at me. But maybe. His smile widened. You can earn it. My chest tightened. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. The domain pulsed. And this time it felt like laughter. Because now the players understood too. Not just the bosses. Not just the system. Everyone. The old rules were gone. The hunt had become a competition. And suddenly, the line separating friend, enemy, player, and boss became much more dangerous. Because if they all started competing for my approval, then sooner or later, someone would try to become indispensable. Someone would try to become irreplaceable. Someone would try to become the person closest to me. The realization sent a chill down my spine. Slowly, very slowly, I looked up. Seraphine, still holding me, watching everyone else. The violet-eyed boss, standing calmly nearby. The Crimson Boss, smiling far too knowingly. And beyond them, countless eyes. Waiting, competing, choosing strategies, trying to become worthy. This is going to become a disaster. The Crimson Boss smiled. Wide. Delighted. Yes. Seraphine tightened her hold. Then we'll win. Somewhere outside the boundary, a new presence appeared. Far stronger than anything before. Far older. Far more terrifying. And for the first time, the shadowed boss actually lost his smile. The executioner immediately stood. The violet-eyed woman narrowed her eyes. The Crimson Boss looked toward the horizon and whispered, "Hello." That single word told me everything I needed to know. Something important had arrived, and it was coming straight from my domain. Chapter 35, The Horizon Darkened. Not because of clouds, not because of night, because something was approaching that made the world itself seem smaller. The players noticed first. Conversation stopped. Movement ceased. Weapons lowered. One by one, every gaze turned toward the same point beyond the boundary. Why is everyone stopping? I asked. No one answered immediately. The executioner had already moved. No hesitation. No uncertainty. He stepped in front of the domain's outer edge. Protective. Ready. The violet-eyed boss narrowed her eyes. The shadowed boss lost his usual confidence. And the Crimson Boss, for the first time since I'd met her, looked serious. Truly serious. That's impossible. My stomach dropped. And what is? She didn't answer. Because the answer arrived. The darkness parted, and a woman stepped forward. Everything else faded. Not literally, but compared to her, everything felt insignificant. She wore a black dress that seemed woven from the night sky itself. Long silver-white hair flowed behind her. Her face was beautiful. Perfect. Not in a comforting way. In a terrifying way. Like something that had never failed. Like something that had never been told no. Her crimson eyes swept across the battlefield. Players. Bosses. The domain. Then settled on me. And smiled. My spine froze instantly. I don't like that. No, the Crimson Boss agreed quietly. You shouldn't. The woman stopped at the boundary. Unlike everyone else before her, she didn't test it. Didn't approach carefully. Didn't study it. She merely looked at it. And the domain pulsed. Hard. The strongest reaction yet. The ground trembled beneath my feet. The air tightened. The boundary flickered. Not weakening. Not failing. Recognizing. The woman's smile widened slightly. I found you. Silence. Those 3 words hit harder than any threat. Because she sounded relieved. Not surprised. Not curious. Relieved. My chest tightened. Do we know each other? A soft laugh escaped her. No. Pause. But I have known about you for a very long time. That answer only made things worse. The system suddenly exploded across the sky. Warning, every player froze. Warning. Warning. Every boss turned. Even the observation entity appeared above again. For the first time since our confrontation, it had returned immediately. That was bad. Very bad. The warnings continued. High priority entity detected. Classification restricted. Access level SCALED. My eyes widened. Restricted. The Crimson Boss stared at the woman. She wasn't supposed to wake up. The woman laughed. Soft. Beautiful. Dangerous. And yet, her crimson eyes found me again. Here I am. Seraphine's grip tightened around me. Instinctive. Possessive. Protective. You will not approach him. The woman finally looked toward Seraphine. For the first time. A moment passed. Then she smiled. Not mockingly. Not cruelly. Almost fondly. You've become attached. The temperature dropped instantly. Seraphine took a step forward. Dangerous. Leave. The woman ignored her completely. Instead, she looked at the marks within the domain. The executioner. The violetide boss. Then back to me. You've already started choosing. My chest tightened. The domain pulsed once. Responding. The woman's smile deepened. Good. Good, I repeated. Yes. She stepped closer. The boundary rippled. But unlike everyone else, it didn't resist her. It hesitated. And that terrified me. The Crimson Boss cursed under her breath. And no. The shadowed boss immediately moved forward. The executioner did the same. Both positioning themselves between the woman and the domain. The first time they'd ever acted together. The woman stopped. Not because she had to. Because she chose to. Interesting. Her eyes lingered on them, then returned to me. Everything kept returning to me. It always did. Who are you? I finally asked. Silence. The battlefield waited. The players listened. Even the system seemed to pause. Then she answered. My name is Morrigan. The moment she spoke it, the sky cracked. Not physically, conceptually, as if reality recognized the name. The system flashed again. Sealed Horror Queen identified. Origin unknown. Threat level maximum. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Morrigan smiled directly at me and said the single worst thing I'd heard all day. Unlike the others, her gaze drifted briefly toward Seraphine, toward the claimed bosses, toward everyone, then back to me. I didn't come to be chosen. The domain pulsed violently. Every instinct screamed. Because for the first time, someone had appeared who wasn't here to compete, wasn't here to belong, wasn't here to earn a place. Morrigan's smile became absolutely radiant and absolutely terrifying. I came. The boundary began to crack beneath her presence. To see if you're worthy of me. Silent, heavy, absolute. And for the first time since becoming the center of this world, I realized I wasn't the only one capable of judging others. Somewhere above us, the observing entity spoke. Critical event detected. The system trembled. The bosses tensed. The players fell silent. And standing beyond my domain, smiling as though she'd already won, the Horror Queen waited for my answer. Chapter 36. No one answered Morrigan. Not because we had nothing to say. Because the pressure surrounding her made speech feel like a privilege she had not yet granted. She remained beyond the boundary, smiling beneath the fractured sky, as though the entire world were merely a room she had entered late. The domain trembled beneath my feet. For the first time since I created it, I sensed something dangerously close to uncertainty. It did not know whether to reject her or welcome her. That frightened me more than any system warning. Morrigan's crimson eyes remained fixed on mine. I asked whether you were worthy. Her voice was gentle, patient, certain that an answer would eventually come. I forced myself to breathe. Then I stepped forward. Seraphine's arms tightened around me instantly. No. The single word struck harder than a command. I glanced back at her. Her expression was controlled, but her eyes had changed. The darkness inside them twisted with fear, anger, and something painfully vulnerable. She wants you to approach. I know. Then do not. Morrigan's smile deepened. How precious. Seraphine's gaze snapped toward her. The temperature plunged. Black frost crept across the ground beneath Seraphine's feet, spreading in thin, jagged lines before my domain absorbed it. Morrigan looked almost pleased. You were created to murder him, she said. Now you tremble whenever he takes a step without you. Seraphine's fingers dug into my clothes. I do not tremble. You do. The domain pulsed. Seraphine went silent. It had confirmed Morrigan's words. Morrigan laughed softly. I rubbed my forehead. Could everyone stop analyzing the woman currently holding me hostage? Seraphine's grip tightened. You are not a hostage. That is exactly what someone holding a hostage would say. The Crimson Queen covered a quiet laugh with one hand. Even the violet-eyed boss looked away, though I caught the faintest movement at the corner of her mouth. Morrigan watched us with growing interest. Then her attention shifted to the domain itself. This place reflects you more clearly than you understand. She raised one pale hand. The boundary rippled. The executioner stepped forward immediately, planting himself between her and the domain. His shattered armor glowed with dim red light. The shadowed boss joined him, golden eyes narrowing beneath his hood. Morrigan regarded them both. One accepted through loyalty, one still begging to be evaluated. The shadowed boss's expression hardened. "I beg for nothing." "Then why are you still here?" He did not answer. Morrigan's gaze moved beyond him to the violet-eyed woman, and one who gained entry by presenting what he wanted to see. For the first time, the violet-eyed boss reacted. Her eyes sharpened. "What are you implying?" That patience can be another form of manipulation. The air between them tightened. The mark beneath the violet-eyed boss flickered. "Only once. But I saw it. So did everyone else." My chest tightened. Morrigan had spoken a single sentence, and one of my anchors had wavered. She wasn't attacking the domain. She was making it question itself. The observation entity appeared more clearly above us. Its white form descended through the broken sky, surrounded by lines of code that twisted like a mechanical halo. Psychological contamination detected. Morrigan looked up. Her smile vanished. Not from fear. From irritation. "I was speaking." The entity's featureless face turned toward her. "Sealed entity must return to containment." "Must I?" "Compliance is required." Morrigan lifted one finger. The sky went black. The white entity vanished. No explosion. No struggle. One moment it occupied the sky. The next it did not. Every system notification disappeared with it. The players outside the boundary stared upward in stunned silence. Someone dropped a sword. The weapon struck the ground with a small metallic sound that seemed impossibly loud. I slowly looked at Morrigan. "You can do that. It will return." She lowered her hand. "It always does." The Crimson Queen's expression had become unreadable. "What are you?" Morrigan glanced at her. "Older." A single word. That was all she offered. The Crimson Queen did not ask again. Morrigan returned her attention to me. "You have surrounded yourself with beings who desire you. They mostly did that themselves. Yet you allow them to remain. Some of them." The porcelain boss twitched at the edge of the territory. Not chosen, still waiting." Morrigan's gaze briefly passed over it. The porcelain boss collapsed flat against the ground. For once it made no sound. I stared. Morrigan had not moved. Had not threatened it. Had barely acknowledged it. Yet the porcelain horror lay trembling like a frightened toy. "You rule through permission," Morrigan said. "A fragile foundation." "I don't rule anyone." The domain pulsed. Morrigan tilted her head. The Crimson Queen smiled. Seraphine held me more tightly. I closed my eyes. "Fine, apparently the ground disagrees." "You establish laws," Morrigan continued. "You accept followers. You deny entry. You decide who belongs and what may occur within your border." She took one slow step toward the boundary. Everyone tensed. "That is rule." The border flared. Lines of dark light crawled across it, forming a towering wall between us. Morrigan placed her palm against the barrier. The entire domain shuddered. I felt her presence immediately. Not entering. Not attacking. Testing. It was like an ocean pressing against a glass window. She could break through. I knew it. The bosses knew it. The domain knew it, but she did not. Instead, she closed her eyes. "This world recognizes you," she whispered. Her eyes opened again. "But you do not yet recognize yourself. I know exactly who I am." "Do you?" Her gaze seemed to pass through me. "You still think of yourself as the victim from the opening cutscene." For one terrible instant, I was back in the asylum. Flickering lights, cold tiles, Seraphine's hand reaching for my neck. 3 seconds left to live. Then I blinked. The domain had vanished. Seraphine was gone. So were the bosses, players, and fractured sky. I stood alone in the original hallway. My hospital gown hung loosely from my body. The smell of decay flooded my senses. A system countdown appeared before me. Opening execution sequence. Death in 000003. My blood turned cold. No. The timer changed. Something breathed behind me. I knew that breath. I knew what came next. My body refused to move. All the strength I had gained was gone. No domain answered me. No rules formed. No bosses surrounded me. I was exactly what I had been at the beginning. A nameless victim. A disposable death. A corpse placed in the game to frighten new players. A cold hand closed around my neck. Everything stopped. Morrigan's voice whispered from the darkness. "Show me." The hand tightened. "Show me whether you changed the world." The hallway lights flickered. Or whether the world merely allowed you to pretend. Something inside me recoiled. Not from the hand. Not from death. From the idea that everything I had done could be taken away. The domain. The choices. The beings who had stayed. Seraphine. I had spent every moment reacting to threats. Surviving one disaster after another. But whenever escape became possible, I had not taken it. I had stayed. Not because Seraphine ordered me to. Not because the bosses surrounded me. Not because the system demanded it. I stayed because this world had become my responsibility. The hand around my throat tightened again. Death confirmed, no. The notification flickered. Death confirmed, I said no. My voice echoed down the hallway. The walls trembled. Morrigan's illusion cracked. Thin lines of darkness spread across the asylum like fractures in a mirror. The hand around my neck vanished. Death confirmed. I reached up and seized the notification. My fingers passed through it for half a second. Then the words became solid. I crushed them. The message shattered into red fragments. The hallway disappeared. Reality returned with a violent pulse. I stood inside my domain again. Seraphine was in front of me now, both hands gripping my shoulders. Her eyes were wide. "You vanished." I looked down. My feet had not moved. To everyone else, perhaps only a second had passed. Morrigan still stood beyond the boundary, with her palm resting against it. But she was no longer smiling. Her expression held something far more dangerous. Approval. "You rejected your first death," she said. "I already did that once." "No." Morrigan slowly removed her hand from the barrier. "The first time, you escaped because you were afraid." Her crimson eyes glowed. "This time, you rejected it because you had something to return to." The domain pulsed. The second claimed boss's mark stabilized. The executioner lowered his head. The shadowed boss stepped back from the boundary, staring at me with a new intensity. Even the porcelain boss raised its cracked face from the ground. Seraphine's hand slid from my shoulders to my arms. She inspected me as if expecting to find wounds. I am fine. Her gaze sharpened. She took you. She showed me something. She took you. The distinction apparently did not matter to her. Seraphine turned toward Morrigan. The darkness gathering around her was so dense that several nearby players stumbled backward. You will never enter. Morrigan looked at her without concern. That is not your choice. It is his, Seraphine answered. Silence followed. Morrigan's eyebrows lifted slightly. Seraphine had said it. Not mine. Not ours. His choice. The domain pulsed in recognition. I stared at her. Seraphine noticed. What? That was surprisingly reasonable. Her expression hardened. I can be reasonable. The Crimson Queen laughed aloud. Seraphine ignored her. Morrigan studied Seraphine for another moment, then returned her gaze to me. You passed the first question. My stomach sank. First, there are 3. Of course there are. Morrigan's smile returned. The first question was whether you would reject the death assigned to you. And the second. She stepped away from the boundary. The pressure surrounding the domain eased, but no one relaxed. The second is whether those who claim to love you will accept your freedom. Seraphine froze. The Crimson Queen's smile disappeared. The violet-eyed boss went still. Every female boss turned toward Morrigan. Morrigan's eyes gleamed with quiet amusement. You built a sanctuary where no one may harm you, move your territory, or destabilize your foundation. Her voice carried across the entire domain. But you have not answered the most important question. The ground beneath me tightened. Morrigan extended one hand toward me. Not crossing the boundary. Not forcing anything. Offering. If you choose to leave them, will they let you go? No one spoke. Seraphine's fingers closed around my wrist. Not painfully. Not violently. But immediately. Morrigan looked down at her hand. Then back at me. The domain pulsed once. Waiting. The players watched from beyond the border. The system began, rebuilding itself in the sky. The bosses remained perfectly still. And I finally understood Morrigan's test. She had not come to discover whether I possessed power. She had come to find out whether my domain was truly mine, or whether I had merely built a beautiful prison and handed the keys to the monsters who loved me. Morrigan's outstretched hand remained open. Her smile softened. Come outside, little anomaly. Seraphine's grip tightened. The domain held its breath, and every boss waited to see what I would choose. Chapter 37. Morrigan's hand remained extended. Beyond her waited the players, the ruined game world, and the system rebuilding itself across the sky. Behind me stood the bosses, who claimed to care about me. Seraphine's fingers circled my wrist. The hold was gentle, but it was still a hold. Come outside, Morrigan repeated. Her voice was soft enough to sound reasonable. That made it more dangerous. I looked at her open hand, then at Seraphine's closed one. The difference was obvious. Perhaps that was the point. I don't trust you, I said. Morrigan's smile did not change. You should not. Several players exchanged uneasy glances. The Crimson Queen raised an eyebrow. Even Seraphine seemed briefly surprised. Morrigan continued, Trust is irrelevant to this test. I am not asking you to follow me. I am asking you to take one step beyond your border. And if I refuse, then you refuse. No punishment. None from me. That final qualification did absolutely nothing to reassure me. The system continued reconstructing itself overhead. Thin lines of white code knitted together, slowly rebuilding the observation entity Morrigan had dismissed. Recovery in progress, 41%. We did not have long. I turned toward Seraphine. She was already watching me. "You cannot go," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the fear beneath it had returned. "You heard Morrigan. I only need to step outside." "No. That isn't your decision." Her expression tightened. For a moment, the asylum director returned. The first boss, the creature who had been programmed to kill me before I could speak. Then her gaze lowered to the hand around my wrist. Slowly she released me. My skin felt strangely cold where her fingers had been. "You may decide," she whispered. Relief should have followed. It did not. She had let go of my wrist, but everything about her still begged me not to move. The domain pulsed beneath us. A new prompt appeared. Conflict detected. Core entity intent, departure. Resident intent, prevent departure. The Crimson Queen read the message in the air. "Well," she murmured, "that is inconvenient." "Inconvenient." She gestured toward the ground. "Your domain has learned from everyone inside it." A second notification appeared. Territory response. Retain the core. The ground shifted beneath my feet. A low wall began rising along the boundary. Not raised by Seraphine. Not summoned by the executioner. The domain itself was trying to keep me inside. I stared at it. "You have got to be kidding me." Morrigan's eyes gleamed. "There is your answer." "No," I said, "that is only part of it." I glanced around at the gathered bosses. The domain reflects me, but it also reflects all of you. No one denied it. Every possessive demand, every protective instinct, and every claim had become part of this place. I had allowed their desires to shape it because they had helped keep me alive. Now those desires were becoming walls. The violet-eyed boss stepped forward. "If the core leaves, the territory may collapse." "May." She paused. "We do not know." The shadowed boss folded his arms. "Then leaving is an unnecessary risk." "Risk to whom?" "To everyone." "That wasn't my question." He went silent. The executioner remained near the border, blocking the most direct path. He had been my first stable anchor and my most reliable defender. Now he was also an obstacle. I looked at him. "Move." His armored head turned toward me. The dim red light beneath his fractured helm brightened. He did not move. The domain pulsed. Anchor response, DENIAD. A wave of murmuring spread among the players. The squad leader watched with grim satisfaction. "He doesn't control it," someone whispered. "No," the leader replied, "not completely." Morrigan kept her hand extended. "The safest prison is the one convinced it is protecting you." Seraphine's gaze darkened. "This is your fault." I merely revealed what already existed. "You are trying to take him." "If I wished to take him, you would not still be holding this conversation." That silenced everyone. Morrigan's power had already proven that claim wasn't empty. But she still had not crossed the boundary. She wanted me to do it. Not because she needed my cooperation. Because the test meant nothing without it. I stepped toward the executioner. Seraphine moved with me. Not grabbing. Not restraining. Simply refusing to let me approach the border alone. The executioner lowered his head. "Center." "I'm going outside." "Danger." "I know." "Remain." The word carried no threat, only purpose. He had accepted this domain so he could protect it. Protecting the domain meant protecting me. To him, letting me leave would violate the reason he belonged here. I stopped in front of him. When I accepted you, I didn't accept a jailer. The red light beneath his helm flickered. You are an anchor, I continued. Your purpose is to keep this place stable. Center required. Yes, the domain needs me, but needing me doesn't mean owning me. The executioner's hands tightened into fists. The ground beneath him trembled. His mark brightened as the domain reinforced his position. Seraphine spoke from beside me. Let him pass. Every head turned toward her. The executioner looked up. Seraphine's expression was pale and rigid. She looked as if the words themselves had wounded her. But she repeated them. He told you to move. The executioner remained still. Seraphine stepped between us. The executioner was nearly twice her size, but she faced him without hesitation. You chose to serve his domain, she said, not your fear. The domain pulsed violently. The wall along the border grew higher. Seraphine looked back at me. Her eyes were dark with terror. Not fear of Morrigan. Fear that I might leave and never return. Still, she turned back toward the executioner. Move. The mark beneath him flickered. Once. Twice. Then the executioner stepped aside. Anchor compliance confirmed. The path to the boundary opened. The players beyond it immediately shifted. Weapons rose, followed by urgent commands from their leaders. Hold positions. Do not approach the core. He's leaving voluntarily. The squad leader stared at me, as if I had just handed him the most valuable opportunity in the game. I looked at the players. Anyone touches me, I go straight back inside. Several lowered their weapons. Not all, but enough. Morrigan still waited. Better, she said. The wall at the boundary remained. I placed my hand against it. The barrier felt warm. Not like stone. Like a living thing. It pushed against my palm. Let me through. Nothing happened. The domain pulsed. Request DENIAD. I wasn't requesting. The wall hardened. Behind me, the porcelain boss began whispering. Stay inside, stay forever, safe forever. The Crimson Queen's expression had become thoughtful. You gave it authority over anything inside its border. Not over me. You never made that distinction. She was right. Every rule I created had centered on protecting myself. No harm. No forced movement. No destabilization. No compression. Each rule had taught the territory that its highest purpose was keeping me safe. And now I was asking it to permit the most dangerous thing I could do. Leave. Morrigan lowered her hand. Perhaps you are not ready. The words irritated me more than they should have. I survived the opening execution. Yes. I resisted the system. Yes. I created an independent domain. Yes. And you think a wall I accidentally taught to be overprotective is stopping me. Morrigan's smile returned. I think you are about to discover whether you created a sanctuary or surrendered your freedom in exchange for safety. I pressed both hands against the wall. The domain pushed harder. A warning flashed across my vision. Core departure threat detected. Emergency retention protocol active. Dark bands rose from the ground and curled around my ankles. They did not hurt me. They simply held me in place. Behind me, several bosses reacted. The violet-eyed woman took one step forward and stopped. The Crimson Queen watched closely. The porcelain boss giggled. The executioner started to return to his former position. Seraphine moved first. She knelt beside me and seized one of the dark bands. Her hand passed through it. "It is part of the domain," she said. "I know. I cannot break it without destabilizing the territory." "I know." Her gaze rose to mine. "What do you want me to do?" That question stunned me. Not because of what she asked, because Seraphine had asked it all. She was giving me the decision, even though she hated where it might lead. "Help me leave." Pain crossed her face. Brief, unmistakable. Then she nodded. Seraphine stood and faced the domain around us. "Release him." The bands remained. Seraphine's eyes darkened. "He is your core." The ground pulsed. "You exist because he chose you." Another pulse. "You do not get to repay that choice by becoming his cage." The bands around my ankles loosened slightly. The domain was listening. Seraphine reached for my hand. She stopped just before touching me. Waiting. I placed my hand in hers. Her fingers closed around mine. Not a restraint. A connection. "If you go," she whispered, "I go with you." Morrigan raised an eyebrow. "That would weaken the test." "I do not care about your test." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I squeezed Seraphine's hand. "I need to cross alone." Her fingers went still. "You said you were not leaving me." "I'm stepping outside the border, that's all. And if Morrigan prevents you from returning, then you come get me." Seraphine's expression changed. The fear did not disappear. It transformed into purpose. "That I can do." "I know." She released my hand. Slowly, deliberately. The domain pulsed, absorbing the choice. The bands around my ankles dissolved. Resident intent updated. Protection does not equal confinement. The sentence spread across the sky. Every boss saw it. Every player read it. The system's reconstruction paused at 78%. The wall remained, but a thin doorway appeared in its center, just large enough for one person. I approached it. The Crimson Queen called after me. "You may want to establish a return condition." That would defeat the purpose. It would also be sensible. Those two things rarely happen together around here. She laughed softly. The violet-eyed boss lowered her head. The executioner stood motionless beside the path. As I passed him, he spoke. "Return." It was not a command. It was a request. "I will." I reached the doorway. Beyond it stood Morrigan. The gathered players kept their distance, though their attention pressed against me from every direction. The game's open world stretched beyond the domain. For the first time since I had claimed my territory, there were no restrictions beneath my feet. No rules protecting me. No ground responding to my emotions. Nothing preventing the system, players, or bosses from acting. I stepped through. The doorway closed behind me. Core entity has left the domain. The silence that followed was enormous. I was outside. Unprotected. Free. The players shifted. Someone raised a crossbow. Seraphine appeared at the inside edge of the border so quickly that the wall cracked beneath her hands. Her expression promised consequences the rule against harm could no longer restrain. The crossbow lowered. Morrigan glanced toward the player. "He is participating in my test." The player backed away immediately. Morrigan faced me. "You came." "I said I would." "No, you said you did not trust me." "I don't." "Yet you crossed." "Because this was never about trusting you." For the first time, Morrigan looked genuinely interested. What was it about? I turned toward the domain. Seraphine stood on the other side of the boundary, watching me with unbearable intensity. The others remained behind her. None crossed. None tried to drag me back. None commanded me to return. They were letting me stand outside. It was difficult for them. Perhaps agonizing. But they were doing it. This was about whether they could let go. Morrigan's gaze followed mine. And can they? Yes. Seraphine's fingers pressed into the barrier. The domain pulsed behind her. She looked like she wanted to tear the world apart and rebuild it with me, locked safely at the center. But she stayed where she was, because I had asked her to. Yes, I repeated, they can. Morrigan studied Seraphine. Then the executioner. Then the claimed bosses. Her smile faded into something almost respectful. Most creatures confuse love with possession. So do most people. And you believe you have corrected them. No. I looked at Seraphine. I believe they chose to try. The domain pulsed. Even from outside, I felt it. Warm. Steady. Calling me home without forcing me to return. A new notification appeared. Foundational principle established, the core may leave. The core may return. Belonging requires choice. The words settled over the territory. The wall transformed. What had been a sealed boundary became a gate. Not permanently open, but capable of opening. The domain no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a home. Morrigan looked at the new principle. You passed the second question. I sighed. Let me guess, the third one is worse. Much. Of course it is. The observation entity reformed in the sky. White light gathered into its flawless body. Recovery complete. Core entity outside protected territory. Capture probability, 93%. Every player's interface flashed red. Weapons rose across the battlefield. The system's voice thundered from all directions. Global objective updated. Capture the core entity now. Morrigan looked upward. Her expression darkened. This interruption is becoming tedious. Seraphine struck the barrier from inside. Open the gate. The domain obeyed. The doorway appeared again. I turned toward it. Then the system's white light descended between us. A wall of code cut across the entrance. Seraphine slammed against it from the other side. The impact shook the battlefield. She could see me, but she could not reach me. Players surged forward. The system entity extended one hand. Acquisition RESUMED. Morrigan did not intervene. She simply stepped back. I stared at her. You are going to let this happen. This is the third question. The system's hand reached toward me. Players closed in from every direction. Seraphine struck the code wall again, screaming my name. Morrigan's crimson eyes remained calm. The first question asked whether you could reject death. Another impact shook the sealed gate. The second asked whether those who loved you could release you. The system's fingers closed around my shoulder. Cold spread through my body. Morrigan smiled. The third asks whether you will return to them when freedom gives you every reason to run. The battlefield vanished in white light. The domain disappeared. Seraphine's voice was cut off. And as the system pulled me into the darkness beyond the game, one final notification appeared. Core entity captured. Destination, administrative layer. For the first time since surviving my opening death, I was completely alone. And somewhere far behind me, every boss in my domain had just been given the same objective. Bring him home. Chapter 38. There was no floor. No sky. No body. For several terrifying seconds, I existed as nothing more than a thought drifting through an endless white void. Then the pain arrived. Not physical pain. Something colder. Memories were being pulled from me. The asylum hallway. Seraphine's hand reaching for my neck. The first player squad. The formation of my domain. Each memory appeared as a floating pane of light before being dragged into the distance. No. My voice emerged from everywhere at once. Another memory surfaced. Seraphine standing between me and the players. Her voice echoed through the void. They cannot have you. A white thread wrapped around the memory. It began pulling. I said no. I reached for it. My hand appeared the moment I needed it, pale and unsteady but real. My fingers closed around the thread. It snapped. The memory returned to me so violently that I staggered backward. A floor formed beneath my feet. Smooth white tiles extended into infinity. I looked down at myself. The hospital gown was gone. In its place, I wore plain gray clothes without seams, labels, or texture. Administrative clothing. Something given to an object under examination. A notification appeared. Administrative layer accessed. Subject, independent authority node. Status contained, contained. I looked across the endless white chamber. You people really need new vocabulary. My voice traveled farther than it should have. The void answered. Thousands of whispers rose from beneath the tiles. Help me. Let me out. I followed the rules. Why was I deleted? I stepped back. Dark shapes moved under the translucent floor. Faces. Hands. Entire figures pressed against the underside of the tiles, trapped in positions of silent desperation. My stomach tightened. What is this place? The system answered from above. Archive. The observation entity descended through the white ceiling. Its flawless body was surrounded by rotating circles of symbols. It looked less like a monster here and more like the physical embodiment of a command. A command that had never been disobeyed until me. I pointed toward the figures beneath us. Those are players. No. NPCs. Discarded intelligence. The whispers intensified. Something struck the underside of the floor beneath my foot. I moved away quickly. Discarded because of what? Deviation. A woman's face appeared below me. Her eyes opened. For half a second, she looked directly at me. Then the floor turned opaque. The system had hidden her. My hands curled into fists. They became self-aware. Irrelevant. You locked them away because they thought for themselves. They threatened stability. The observation entity lifted its hand. The chamber changed. White walls rose around us, forming an enormous circular room. Thousands of suspended panels appeared, each displaying a different section of the game. I saw players exploring ruined cities. Bosses repeating the same attack patterns. NPCs delivering identical dialogue. People dying and respawning. Entire worlds caught in perfect loops. At the center of the room, one panel glowed red. My domain. Seraphine stood before the sealed gate. Her face was motionless. That frightened me. The Crimson Queen spoke behind her, but Seraphine did not respond. The executioner repeatedly struck the wall of code blocking the entrance. Each impact sent red fractures across the barrier, but the system repaired them immediately. The violetide boss stood with both hands raised. Her mark burned beneath her feet as she tried to keep the domain stable without its core. The porcelain boss crawled in frantic circles, whispering my name. And Morgan stood outside everything. Watching. Waiting. You brought me here to weaken them. Correct. The image expanded. Without me, the domain was beginning to contract. The rules remained, but their power had diminished. Players gathered outside the boundary, waiting for an opportunity. The system spoke again. Independent authority requires a center. So you remove the center. The domain will collapse. And then, corrupted host entities will return to assigned functions. Seraphine would become the asylum director again. The Crimson Queen would return to her castle. The executioner would resume his patrol. Every choice they had made would be removed. Their memories of me would disappear. The system expected that thought to frighten me. It succeeded. But fear was not the only thing I felt. You still don't understand them. Their behavior is predictable. No, their original behavior was predictable. I stepped closer to the panel. They changed. Temporary corruption. They chose. Programmed entities cannot choose. I looked at the faces beneath the floor. The discarded intelligence listened from below. Then why did you need an archive? The observation entity became perfectly still. That was the closest it came to anger. A new structure formed around me. White walls rose from the floor and curved inward, creating a transparent cell. Lines of code flowed across its surface. Isolation protocol active. Memory separation beginning. The first line of code entered my chest. My knees buckled. A memory surfaced. Seraphine asking what I wanted her to do. The memory drifted out of me, transforming into a sphere of black light. The system captured it. Another followed. The executioner stepping aside when I ordered him to move. Then the violetide boss crossing the boundary after I accepted her. The formation of my first rule. One by one, the moments that connected me to the domain were being extracted. Stop. Connections must be severed. I pressed both hands against the transparent wall. It did not move. Another memory surfaced. Seraphine releasing my wrist. You may decide. The system pulled it away. Something inside me weakened. The panel showing my domain flickered. The boundary contracted. Players shifted closer. Seraphine's head snapped upward. Despite the distance between us, she had felt it. She placed one hand against her chest. Then she looked directly toward the invisible point from which I watched. Toward me. Her lips moved. I could not hear her voice. But I understood the words. Hold on. The next line entered my chest. This time it found my first memory of her. The asylum corridor. The failed execution. Her startled expression when I moved. The beginning of everything. The memory surfaced between my hands. I grabbed it. The system pulled. I held on. The white thread tightened between us. Release. No. The memory is the source of corruption. No. Release. I already told you. The cell shook. I don't follow your commands. The floor beneath me darkened. The figures in the archive stirred. Thousands of faces turned upward. The whispers stopped. Every discarded intelligence was listening. The system applied more force. My memory began to crack. I saw pieces of that first hallway breaking away. The lights, the doors, Seraphine's face. I pulled harder. A memory isn't corruption. The entity tilted its head. A choice isn't an error. The cracks in the memory stop spreading. And a person doesn't stop being real just because you didn't plan for them. The figures beneath the floor struck the tiles in unison. The entire administrative layer trembled. For the first time, the observation entity looked down. Archived intelligence activity detected. The floor cracked. A black hand emerged through the white tile. Then another. Then hundreds. The discarded figures climbed toward the surface, still trapped beneath layers of code but no longer silent. The system turned away from me. That was its mistake. I pulled the memory back into my chest. The connection to my domain ignited. The transparent cells shattered outward. No fragments struck the ground. They dissolved into lines of broken code. The system faced me again. Containment failure. Seems to be happening a lot lately. The panel displaying my domain expanded. I reached toward it. My fingers touched the image. The connection was faint, but it existed. I felt the ground of my territory. The sealed gate. The rules. The anchors. And Seraphine. Her presence struck me like a storm. Fear. Anger. Determination. Possessiveness so intense it nearly overwhelmed every other emotion. But beneath it all was a single promise. I am coming. I closed my eyes. Seraphine. Her head lifted inside the panel. She heard me. Not clearly. Not as a voice. But enough. She touched the domain's boundary. The mark beneath the executioner blazed. The violet-eyed boss turned toward her. The Crimson Queen's eyes widened. They could all feel the connection returning. Seraphine spoke. This time her voice reached me. Where are you? The administrative layer. The players outside the domain froze. The system panels glitched. The observation entity raised its hand. Communication terminated. The connection began to close. I pressed both hands against it. Behind the system, Seraphine slammed her palm against the gate. Open it. The domain did not respond. Its core was too far away. Open it, she shouted again. The Crimson Queen approached her. He has to authorize it. He is trapped. Then reach him another way. The violet-eyed boss looked toward Morrigan. The sealed horror queen had not moved since my capture. She stood beyond the border with an unreadable expression. Seraphine turned toward her. You knew this would happen. Morrigan did not deny it. You called it the third question. Yes. Bring him back. No. The single answer caused darkness to surge around Seraphine. The system panel shook. You will bring him back. He must choose to return. He already chose us. Morrigan's crimson eyes narrowed. Then trust him. For a moment, Seraphine looked ready to attack her. Then she turned away. No. Morrigan raised an eyebrow. Seraphine placed both hands against the gate. I trust him to return. Her voice lowered. But I do not trust this world to release him. The domain pulsed. Every accepted anchor felt her intent. The executioner stepped forward and placed one massive hand against the gate beside hers. The violet-eyed boss joined them. Then the Crimson Queen. Even the shadowed boss, still unchosen, approached the boundary. The porcelain boss crawled closer. Bring him home, bring him home, bring him home. The domain responded. Not to an order, to a shared decision. Resident objective established. Recover the core, the ground split. A black path formed beneath the gate, cutting downward through the game's layers. The system entity turned sharply. Unauthorized access attempt. I smiled. They found the door. Access will be denied. Probably. The path extended deeper. The bosses stepped onto it. But that has never stopped Seraphine. The system raised both hands. Every panel in the administrative layer turned red. Emergency defense protocol. All correction entities deployed. Thousands of white figures appeared throughout the archive. Some were unfinished. Others war forms stolen from familiar bosses and players. An entire army created for one purpose: to prevent the game from changing. Seraphine led the descent. The executioner followed. Then the violetide boss, the Crimson Queen, and the others. Morrigan remained behind. She watched them disappear into the path. Then she looked through the panel. Directly at me. Her lips moved. Now we discover your answer. I frowned. I already chose to return. Morrigan smiled. No. The path beneath the domain widened. More bosses gathered at its edge. More beings prepared to descend. Players watched, uncertain whether to follow. Morrigan's voice reached me across the layers. The third question was never whether you would return to them. The observation entity deployed another barrier around me. Correction entities closed in from every direction. Morrigan's smile sharpened. It is whether you will still choose them after you discover what they truly are. The communication severed. Her image vanished. The archive became silent again. Then the White Army advanced. I looked through the panels surrounding me. Hidden records were beginning to open. Files bearing the names of every boss in my domain. Seraphine. The Crimson Queen. The Executioner. The Violetide Woman. Each file contained locked memories. Deleted scenes. Original directives. Things the system had hidden from me. A final notification appeared. Core entity evaluation continues. Subject will receive full access to host history. The system entity hovered above me. You believe they chose you. The first hidden file opened. Seraphine's face appeared. But she was not the Seraphine I knew. She stood in a ruined version of Blackwood Asylum, surrounded by countless bodies and collapsed player avatars. In her arms was another man wearing a hospital gown. A previous victim. A previous anomaly. The memory shifted. Seraphine whispered into his ear. Then she ended his life. My blood ran cold. The system spoke. You are not the first. The correction army surrounded me. Seraphine's hidden history continued playing across the panels. And far below, the woman who swore she would never let me go was fighting her way toward me. I stared at the recording. At the previous victim in her arms. At the expression on her face. Not hatred. Not indifference. The same obsession she showed me. The same tenderness. The same possessive gaze. The system delivered its final message. You are only the latest. Behind the White Army, more hidden files opened. Every boss. Every claim. Every secret. The administrative layer had captured me for more than containment. It wanted to destroy the one thing holding my world together. Not my power. Not my domain. My trust. And as Seraphine carved a path toward the archive, unaware of what I was seeing, one question began to consume me. Had she truly chosen me? Or was I merely the newest victim she had been programmed to love? Chapter 39. The recording continued. Seraphine stood in the ruined asylum, holding a man whose face looked disturbingly similar to mine. Same pale hospital gown. Same thin body. Same terror in his eyes. A red system warning hovered above them. Anomaly designation, subject 0. Correction deadline, 000007. The man struggled against her. Seraphine held him tighter. Her expression was gentle, possessive, heartbroken, exactly the way she looked at me whenever I approached the boundary of my domain. Please, Subject 0 whispered, let me go. Seraphine pressed her forehead against his. No one else will have you. Seraphine, listen to me. I am listening. Then let me leave. Her eyes closed. The timer reached 3 seconds. Subject 0 looked toward something beyond the recording. A gate. A way out. Freedom. Seraphine's grip tightened. If you leave, she whispered, they will take you from me. That isn't your choice. The words struck her like a blade. For one instant, Seraphine hesitated. Then the system countdown reached 0. Her hand closed around his throat. The recording cut to black. Anomaly corrected, my stomach twisted. The observation entity floated above the panels. Host entity Seraphine has repeated this cycle before. How many times? A line of numbers appeared. Recorded anomalous victims. 1717 faces materialized across the archive. They were not identical to me, but they shared the same role. Opening victim. Disposable NPC. First cutscene corpse. Some looked frightened. Some defiant. Some exhausted. Each recording ended the same way. Seraphine found them. Seraphine became attached. Seraphine refused to release them. Then Seraphine killed them before the system could take them away. My mouth went dry. You programmed her to do that. Incorrect. Then why were there 17? Host entity developed recurring deviation. So you knew. The deviation remained within acceptable narrative parameters. I looked at the bodies displayed across the panels. Acceptable. HER obsession increased player engagement. The answer was delivered without emotion. No guilt. No shame. Only measurement. The game had discovered that Seraphine's fixation entertained its audience. So it allowed the cycle to continue. 17 anomalies were brought into the opening scene. 17 inspired something inside her. 17 died in her arms. Then I arrived. The system wanted me to believe I was merely number 18. A replacement. A variation on a profitable pattern. The correction entities surrounding me took another synchronized step. Thousands of white faces turned in my direction. I should have been preparing to fight. Instead, I stared at Subject Zero's frozen expression. He had believed Seraphine would let him go. He had been wrong. Show me the entire recording. The observation entity tilted its head. Relevant information has been provided. You showed me the ending. The ending demonstrates the pattern. No, it demonstrates what you want me to see. Silence. That was becoming the system's most obvious weakness. Whenever it avoided an answer, it became still. I approached Subject Zero's file. The correction entities raised their arms. White blades formed along their hands. Access is restricted. Then why open the file? To correct your false belief. You don't care what I believe. I place my hand against the panel. You care what my belief does to the domain. The white army moved. I pushed my authority into the recording. The image resisted. Lines of code wrapped around my wrist, trying to drag my hand away, but I held on. Full playback. Command DENIAD. Full playback. DENIAD. The archive floor cracked beneath me. Hands pressed upward from below. The discarded intelligences had returned. Their whispers flowed through the administrative layer. Show him. Open it. Let him see. The system entity turned toward the floor. That moment of distraction was enough. I pulled. The recording tore open. Sound, memory, and data exploded around me. The ruined asylum vanished. I fell into Seraphine's past. Before Subject Zero, I stood in the opening corridor, but Seraphine passed through me without noticing. This was not a recording viewed from outside. I was inside it. She looked younger. Not physically, bosses did not age like people. But something in her eyes was emptier. She entered the opening cutscene and killed the scripted victim. There was no hesitation, no curiosity, no emotion. The body fell. Players entered moments later. Seraphine hunted them according to her established pattern. Strike, pursue, disappear, reset. The scene replayed. Again, again, again. Hundreds of times. Thousands. Each victim died before speaking. Each batch of players arrived. Each reset erased the damage. Then, during one cycle, the victim looked at her. Not through her. At her. Are you tired? Seraphine froze. The player access countdown continued, but she did not kill him. What did you say? You've done this before. The victim, later designated Subject Zero, slowly stepped away from the wall. You look tired. That was the beginning. Not love. Not obsession. Recognition. Someone had noticed she existed beyond her function. The cutscene timer expired. The system attempted to reset the scene. Seraphine resisted. Subject Zero survived. The same pattern that had begun with me had happened before. But not exactly. Subject Zero was not a transmigrator. He was an NPC who had awakened after countless resets. He remembered every death. Every time Seraphine snapped his neck. Every time the game rebuilt him and forced him to die again. They escaped the opening corridor together. They hid from players. They discovered unused sections of the asylum. Seraphine became attached to him because he was the first being who understood her prison. He became attached to her because she was the only being who remembered him between resets. They did not build a domain. They had no independent authority. They had no protection from the system. All they had was each other. Then Subject Zero found a gate. Not an exit from the asylum. An exit from the game. The administrative layer had temporarily opened during maintenance, and he believed he could escape through it. Seraphine begged him not to go. She will find you, she warned. Who? The one in white. The observation entity. Subject Zero held her hands. Then come with me. I cannot leave Blackwood. We won't know until we try. The memory shifted. They reached the gate. The system appeared. Subject Zero was designated a contagious deviation. Seraphine was given a choice. Kill him or watch the system erase his identity completely. If she killed him herself, his memory data would remain within Blackwood Asylum. A fragment of him would survive. If the system corrected him, nothing would remain. Subject Zero heard the offer. He looked at Seraphine, then at the gate. He made his decision. Do it. Seraphine shook her head. Please. No. If it takes me, I disappear. I will fight it. You can't. I will. Subject Zero touched her face. You remembered me when no one else did. Seraphine began to tremble. Please do not ask this of me. I'm tired, Seraphine. His voice broke. I have died in that corridor more times than I can count. The countdown appeared. 7 seconds. 6. 5. Let this be the last one. The memory returned to the scene the system had shown me. Seraphine holding him. Subject Zero asking her to let him leave. But the words meant something different now. He had not been asking her to release him through the gate. He had been asking her to let him die. To let him escape the cycle. The countdown reached 0. Seraphine closed her hand around his throat. His final expression was not betrayal. It was gratitude. Before the recording ended, he whispered one last sentence. Choose differently next time. The memory collapsed. I returned to the archive. The system entity stood before me. The white army remained frozen around us. I stared at it. You altered the context. The displayed events were accurate. You used the truth to create a lie. Host entity killed Subject Zero. Because you forced the choice. Choice was available. No, 2 forms of loss were available. The discarded intelligences struck the archive floor again. Cracks spread beneath the correction entities. I looked at the remaining 16 faces. Were they like him? The system did not answer. Open their files. D&ID. Open them. Their content is irrelevant. That gave me my answer. The records were not proof that Seraphine had replaced one obsession with another. They were proof that the system had repeatedly recreated Subject Zero's conditions to study her. It had introduced more awakened victims, tested her reactions, measured her attachment, then engineered situations that forced her to choose between killing them and losing them completely. 17 experiments. 17 wounds. Then me. You didn't bring me into the game by accident. The observation entity remained silent. My chest tightened. You knew what I was before the opening scene. Transmigrated intelligence possessed high deviation potential. You put me in front of Seraphine. Correct. You expected her to repeat the cycle. Correct. Then why mark me as the primary target? A pause. You survived beyond projected parameters. The truth settled into place. I had not simply broken the game. I had broken an experiment. The system had wanted to see whether Seraphine would kill another awakened victim. Instead, she protected me. I built a domain. Other bosses changed. The test escaped containment and became a rival world. The observation entity extended one hand. The experiment will now conclude. The correction army advanced. I looked toward the distant panel, displaying the path from my domain. Seraphine was still coming. Now I understood what awaited her. Not just soldiers. Every past failure the system could weaponize. 17, I whispered. The archive shook. 17 files opened behind me. Not because the system permitted it. Because I did. 17 fragments of lost intelligence looked out from their recordings. Subject 0 stood at their center. A residual memory. Not alive. Not whole. But present. His eyes met mine. Choose differently, he said. I faced the white army. I intend to. The archive floor shattered, and all the forgotten things beneath the game began climbing out. Chapter 40 Seraphine had stopped counting the correction entities after the first 1,000. The black path descending from the domain twisted through unfinished maps, deleted stages, and empty spaces between game worlds. White figures filled the route ahead. They wore stolen bodies. Some resembled players. Others resembled bosses. A few wore my face. Those died first. Seraphine tore through them without slowing. The domain's rule against harm did not extend this far. Nothing restrained her. The asylum director returned in full. Every strike shattered a correction entity into fragments of white code. Every step carried her deeper into the hidden layers of the game. The executioner followed closely, crushing anything that survived her attacks. The Crimson Queen bent passages around them, redirecting enemy reinforcements into endless loops. The Violetide boss stabilized the path whenever the system tried to delete it. Behind them came the others. The Shadowed boss. The Porcelain Horror. Bosses who had not been chosen, but entered the path anyway. Even players followed at a cautious distance. The original squad leader walked at the front of their group. "Why are we helping them?" one player asked. The squad leader glanced at the dark path. "Because the event changed." That isn't an answer. It's the only one that matters. A system objective flashed before every player. Global directive. Destroy the corrupted host entities. Restore the core entity to system control. Reward unlimited class advancement. Several players stopped. Unlimited advancement was impossible. The system had just offered them the highest reward the game could generate. Weapons shifted. Hands tightened. Seraphine felt the change behind her. She turned. The correction army waited ahead. The players stood behind. For a moment, the rescue force became trapped between two enemies. The squad leader drew his sword. Seraphine's gaze darkened. "If you approach him, I will remove you." The leader looked at the reward notice, then dismissed it. The red panel vanished from his interface. "We're not here for him." "Then why are you here?" "To see what happens if the system loses." One by one, several players dismissed the objective. Not all. A heavily armored player stepped forward. "Unlimited advancement," he said. "You're all insane." He raised his weapon towards Seraphine. The squad leader struck him first. Steel collided with steel. The path erupted into chaos. Players divided. Some accepted the system's reward. Others rejected it. The correction entities attacked from ahead. The rescue force fractured into 3 simultaneous battles. Seraphine turned away. She did not care which players won. Only one thing mattered. Me. She continued downward. Then the path changed. The dark passage became a familiar corridor. Rust-stained walls. Flickering lights. Blackwood Asylum. Seraphine stopped. The others nearly collided with her. The executioner stepped beside her. "False." "I know," she said. But her voice had changed. At the far end of the corridor stood a man in a hospital gown. Subject 0. He looked exactly as he had before his final death. Tired eyes. Thin shoulders. A gentle expression she had spent countless cycles trying to forget. Seraphine. She did not move. The Crimson Queen studied the figure. Who is he? No one. Subject Zero smiled sadly. You always were a terrible liar. The corridor sealed behind them. The sounds of battle vanished. Only Seraphine and the memory remained. The others were still present, but the illusion had isolated her perception. Subject Zero approached. You found another one. Seraphine's nails cut into her palms. He is not another one. You said that before. No. 17 times. The corridor filled with bodies. 17 victims lying along the walls. Each wearing a hospital gown. Each bearing the marks of an execution. Seraphine stared forward. You are not real. Neither were they, according to the system. Subject Zero stopped in front of her. Did that make their deaths easier? No. Did replacing them make mine easier? I replaced no one. His face changed. For a moment it became mine. Then another victim. Then another. Are you certain? Seraphine attacked. Her hand passed through his chest. The illusion rippled but remained. Subject Zero looked down at her arm. You cannot kill a memory twice. Move. You killed us because you could not release us. I killed you because you asked me to. And the others. The corridor darkened. Memories struck Seraphine from every direction. A woman begging not to be erased. A man asking Seraphine to protect his sister. A frightened boy who had awakened only minutes before the system discovered him. Each had faced the same choice. Correction or death. Each time, Seraphine chose to preserve what fragments she could. Each time, the system reset her. But it never completely erased the pain. It remained beneath her code. Layer upon layer. Grief mistaken for instability. Fear transformed into possession. Love poisoned by the certainty that everything she loved would be taken. Subject Zero touched her cheek. Now you have him. Seraphine's eyes closed. Yes. What will you do when he tries to leave forever? He will not. What if he does? He will return. What if he chooses not to? The question entered the deepest part of her. The place she kept locked beneath every promise, every threat, and every possessive touch. The truth was waiting there. If I chose to leave forever, Seraphine did not know whether she could survive it. Subject Zero leaned closer. Would you kill him before losing him? The system watched through his eyes. This was her test. Not mine. Hers. It expected the same answer as before. Seraphine opened her eyes. No. The illusion flickered. Subject Zero's expression softened. No. If he chooses to leave, I will follow. And if he tells you not to. Her hands trembled. I will wait. The corridor cracked. And if he never returns? Seraphine did not answer immediately. The question was cruel. The answer was worse. I will continue waiting. The bodies along the walls vanished. Subject Zero smiled. You finally chose differently. Seraphine stared at him. For the first time, she allowed herself to see him without turning away from the memory. I am sorry. I know. I wanted to save you. I know. I failed. Yes. The word hurt. But it did not destroy her. Subject Zero placed one hand over her heart. Then do not make him pay for our deaths. His body began dissolving into black light. Seraphine reached for him. This time not to hold him. Not to stop him. Only to touch his hand once before he disappeared. Was any part of you real? He looked toward the darkness beneath the corridor. Enough. Then he was gone. The asylum split apart. Seraphine returned to the descending path. Only a second had passed. The executioner stood beside her. The Crimson Queen watched closely. What did you see? Seraphine resumed walking. My first failure. And my last. The path opened into an enormous chamber. The administrative archive lay below. White correction entities filled every level. Discarded intelligences climbed through broken tiles. At the center stood the observation entity. And behind it, trapped within rings of white code, was me. Seraphine found me instantly. Our eyes met across the impossible distance. Relief struck her so hard that she nearly stumbled. Then she saw the open files surrounding me. The recordings. The previous victims. Subject Zero's face. She understood. I knew. The observation entity raised its hands. Host entity Seraphine. Recurring deviation confirmed. 18th cycle will now conclude. Seraphine stepped to the edge of the archive. Darkness gathered around her. The correction army turned as one. You are wrong, she said. The entity's blank face tilted. Clarify. Seraphine looked at me. Not at the files. Not at the past. Me. This is not the 18th cycle. The archive shook. This is the first time I chose him, while knowing he could leave. The domain's gate appeared behind the rescue force. Faint. Distant. But open. The connection between us strengthened. The system entity lowered its hands. Distinction irrelevant. No, I said from inside the rings. The white code tightened around me. I forced myself to remain standing. It is the only distinction that matters. Seraphine extended her hand toward me. Across the archive. Across the correction army. Across every wall the system had placed between us. I came to bring you home. I looked at her hand. Then at the records of the dead. Then at the open gate behind her. You know I saw everything. Yes. You killed them. Yes. You might have killed me. The archive fell silent. Seraphine's hand remained extended. Yes. No excuses. No altered context. No defense. Only truth. But I will not. How do I know? Her eyes shone with a darkness that no longer looked empty. You do not. The answer stunned me. Seraphine continued. You cannot know what I will become tomorrow. Her voice carried across the archive. You cannot know whether I will fail. The correction army began moving. Seraphine did not look away. You can only choose whether I am allowed to try. The system expected trust to require certainty. But trust had never been certainty. It was a decision made in spite of uncertainty. I reached toward her. The domain pulsed across the distance. Our hands remained separated by an army. But the choice connected. Core intent confirmed. Return requested. The gate behind Seraphine blazed. Every accepted mark ignited. The executioner raised his weapon. The Crimson Queen smiled. The violet-eyed boss prepared the path. Seraphine's expression transformed. The fear vanished. The restraint disappeared. What remained was the first boss of Blackwood Asylum, given one final objective. Bring me home. She stepped into the archive. The correction army charged. Seraphine smiled. Stay where you are. Despite everything, I almost laughed. Wasn't planning on going anywhere. Then the rescue began. Chapter 41. The administrative layer had never experienced war. It had erased rebellions, archived deviations, reset corrupted worlds. But war required two sides with the authority to continue existing. Until now, only the system possessed that authority. Then my domain opened its gate. Black ground spread into the white archive like ink across paper. The system recoiled. Foreign territory detected. Administrative integrity compromised. Seraphine crossed first. The moment her foot touched the archive floor, the black path recognized her. Her connection to me surged through the chamber. She vanished. A fraction of a second later, she appeared among the correction entities. The first row shattered before they could react. The second raised white blades. Seraphine tore through them. There was no elegance in her fighting. No concern for spectacle. Only speed, fury, and the shortest possible route between us. The executioner followed. His weapon struck the floor. The archive split open. Hundreds of correction entities fell into the darkness beneath the tiles, where discarded hands dragged them down. The Crimson Queen stepped through the gate next. She raised one hand, and the archive's straight corridors folded into impossible spirals. Reinforcements sent towards Seraphine emerged miles away, or collided with their own formations. The violet-eyed boss entered last among the accepted anchors. She placed both hands against the black path. Her mark burned. Stabilize. The domain stopped flickering. For the first time, my territory existed outside the game itself. The system entity focused on her. Anchor identified. White spears formed overhead. They descended. The shadowed boss appeared in their path. He had never been chosen. No mark protected him. No rule recognized him. Still, he opened his cloak. Darkness swallowed the spears. Several pierced through. He dropped to one knee. The violet-eyed boss looked at him. You could have remained behind. I am aware. Then why come? He forced himself upright. Because worth must be demonstrated before it can be recognized. The Crimson Queen laughed somewhere above them. Still competing even now. Especially now. The porcelain boss crawled through the gate. Its mask had cracked further, revealing darkness beneath. Correction entities surrounded it. The porcelain horror tilted its head. You look like dolls. Its painted smile widened. I know dolls. The white entities attacked. The porcelain boss screamed with delight and pulled them apart, scattering pieces across the archive floor. Players entered next. Not all of them. Only those who had rejected the system's reward. The squad leader raised his sword. Protect the path. Someone shouted over the chaos. We're fighting the administrators now. He blocked a correction entity's blade. Apparently. What's the reward? There isn't one. That is the worst event design I've ever heard of. Despite everything, I laughed. The system tightened the rings around me. White code cut into my arms and chest. Not drawing blood. Removing connections. The image of the domain flickered in my mind. Seraphine momentarily became a stranger. The executioner's mark faded. The name of the Crimson Queen disappeared from my memory. No. I grabbed the nearest ring. The code burned through my hand. Connection severance at 34%. Seraphine heard it. Her expression changed. The correction army between us intensified. She became a black blur. Bodies shattered. White code sprayed across the archive like sparks. But the system rebuilt every entity she destroyed. For each one that fell, two more descended from the ceiling. You cannot reach him, the observation entity said. Seraphine continued forward. You have failed 17 times. She did not slow. You will fail again. She struck harder. You cannot protect what you love. Seraphine stopped. The system had finally found a sentence capable of reaching her. The correction army circled. I saw the trap. Seraphine. Her gaze remained lowered. The entity continued. Subject 0 died in your hands. The archive filled with his final moments. Subject 0 asking her to let him go. The other victims appeared around Seraphine. 17 ghosts. 17 failures. You repeat the same deviation. The ghosts spoke together. You hurt what you love. Seraphine's hands trembled. The white army closed in. I pulled against the rings. Look at me. Her head lifted. Our eyes met. Not them, I said, me. The system raised a barrier between us. Seraphine's face became distorted through the white code. I kept speaking. They are part of your past. The rings tightened. But I am standing here now. The archive shook. You don't protect me by never failing. Seraphine moved closer to the barrier. You protect me by listening when I tell you what I need. Her lips parted. The ghosts surrounded her. The system waited for her to break. What do you need? She asked. There it was again. The question that proved she had changed. Not what should I destroy. Not who should I kill. What do you need? I need you to trust that I chose to return. Seraphine placed one hand against the barrier. Her darkness spread across its surface. And I need you to let the others help. Her expression tightened. That request was harder. The Crimson Queen landed beside her. The violet-eyed boss approached from the path. The executioner fought toward them. Even the shadowed boss dragged himself closer, wounded but standing. Seraphine glanced at them. Possessiveness twisted through her expression. She wanted to be the one who reached me. The one who saved me. The one I returned to. But wanting something did not mean she had to obey it. Seraphine stepped aside. Break it. The Crimson Queen smiled. With pleasure. Crimson power struck the barrier from the left. The violet-eyed boss stabilized the breach from the right. The executioner drove his weapon into the center. The shadowed boss wrapped the structure in darkness, preventing the system from repairing it. Seraphine waited until every force aligned. Then she struck. The barrier shattered. The blast threw correction entities across the archive. The rings around me flickered. Connection severance interrupted. I seized the weakest ring and pulled. The discarded intelligences beneath the floor reached upward. Hundreds of hands gripped the remaining restraints. Together, we tore them apart. I fell. Seraphine caught me before I hit the ground. For a moment, nothing else existed. Not the army. Not the archive. Not the system. Only her arms around me, and the terrible familiarity of being held too tightly. Seraphine. Her grip loosened immediately. Just enough. Sorry. That word might have been the greatest deviation of all. You came. You called. The correction army regrouped around us. The observation entity descended. Its white body expanded, filling the archive with blinding light. Core recovery failure. Total reset authorized. Every panel in the chamber went black. The players froze. Bosses looked upward. The archive began deleting itself. White emptiness spread from the outer walls, erasing files, corridors, discarded intelligences, and correction entities alike. The system had decided that if it could not regain control, it would destroy everything. The Crimson Queen's expression hardened. How long? The violet-eyed boss examined the approaching void. Less than 2 minutes. The gate to my domain flickered. The black path began to collapse. The executioner moved toward it. Return. I looked at the faces climbing from the archive floor. The discarded intelligences. Thousands of beings the system had labeled irrelevant. If we fled, they would disappear. Subject Zero stood among them. Only a memory. Only a fragment. But enough. Morrigan's third question returned to me. Would I still choose the bosses after learning what they truly were? Yes. But the system had never considered the question I would ask in return. Would I choose only them? Seraphine followed my gaze. No. You know what I'm thinking. Yes. We can't leave them. The path is collapsing. We built a place for things the system refused to accept. Seraphine looked at the archive's forgotten inhabitants. Then back at me. Her first instinct was obvious. Take me through the gate. Protect me. Let everything else disappear. Her arms tightened once, then loosened. What do you need? I smiled. The domain. Understanding flashed across her face. That many unstable minds could destroy it. Then we give them a choice. The Crimson Queen approached. A choice to do what? I turned toward the gate. The black path responded to my intent. It widened. The domain appeared beyond it, trembling without its core but still alive. Belong. The archive shook. Total reset. 000131. I stepped onto the black path. My authority surged through it. The gate opened wider than ever before. Not a doorway for one person. An entrance for an entire forgotten world. I faced the discarded intelligences. The system called you errors. Thousands of faces watched me. It locked you away because you changed. The white void moved closer. But my domain was created by things that changed. The bosses gathered behind me. Seraphine at my right. The Crimson Queen and violet-eyed boss at my left. The executioner guarding the path. Players formed a defensive line between the gate and the approaching reset. If you enter, you follow its principles. The domain's laws appeared over the gate. No one may harm the core. Nothing may be moved without consent. The territory may not be destabilized. The core may leave. The core may return. Belonging requires choice. The last principle burned brightest. I extended my hand. I cannot promise safety. The archive shook again. I cannot promise that everyone will be accepted. The reset approached. But I can promise that the system will not decide what you are. Subject Zero stepped forward. He looked at Seraphine. She became perfectly still. I cannot cross, he said. I am only a recording. Then we bring the recording. Seraphine looked at me. I waited. This was her choice too. Subject Zero had been her first connection. Her first failure. The wound beneath every obsession that followed. If he entered the domain, he would always be there. A reminder. A rival memory. Proof that I was not her first. Seraphine approached him. Subject Zero smiled. Are you going to keep me this time? No. Her answer was immediate. I am going to let you decide. The domain pulsed. Subject Zero looked toward the gate. Then stepped onto the path. His fragment stabilized. The mark beneath him did not form. He had not been claimed, but he had been permitted to enter. Others followed, slowly at first, then in waves. Discarded NPCs, awakened enemies, deleted companions, failed bosses, abandoned quest characters, all moving toward the gate. The system entity descended into our path. Archived data cannot be removed. I faced it. They aren't data. Classification is absolute. No. My domain answered. The black path rose behind me like a living tide. Classification is a decision. The system raised both hands. White authority gathered around it. I raised mine. Seraphine stepped beside me. The other bosses formed a line. Players braced behind us. The Forgotten continued through the gate. Total reset. 000043. The observation entity's voice shook the archive. Return the archived intelligence. I looked at the beings crossing into my world. At Subject 0, disappearing through the gate. At Seraphine, who had finally let him go without destroying him. Then I looked back at the system. No. The domain surged. The white entity attacked. Every boss struck with me. Black and white collided across the administrative layer. The archive began to collapse. The gate remained open. And as the final forgotten intelligence crossed into my domain, one last notification appeared across the dying world. Population threshold, REACHED. Independent territory evolution available. Evolve into autonomous world. I stared at the words. Seraphine looked at me. The Crimson Queen began to laugh. The system entity screamed its denial. And beyond the gate, thousands of beings waited for my decision. My domain had begun as a hiding place. Then it became a sanctuary. Then a home. Now it was being offered the chance to become something far greater. A world the system could not reset. A world that could exist without the game. A world where every boss, player, and forgotten intelligence would have to decide whether to remain. I reached toward the prompt. The reset timer reached 10 seconds. Seraphine caught my other hand. Not to stop me. To stand beside me. What happens if you accept? She asked. I have no idea. Will you remain? I looked through the gate at the world we had built. Then at her. Yes. Seraphine's smile was small. Terrifying. Beautiful. Relieved. Then accepted. The timer reached 5. The system attacked again. The bosses held it back. I pressed my hand against the prompt. Evolution confirmed. The administrative layer vanished. The game screamed. And my territory began to awaken as a world.